Hey guys, Eldon back here again with the next episode of Crazy Dad's Garage. We're going to keep moving forward on the assembly of this small block Chevy that we've been working on. I've got crankshaft all cleaned up there and we're ready to start dropping it into our block. And so that's where we're going to go next. I will flip the camera around and we'll get lined up here. So this is really going to be pretty straightforward. I'm not going to give you a ton of special information on this because there's lots of other guys out there, professional engine builders, and I'm not. But we're going to put this thing back together. Like I said, this motor had been rebuilt, less than 100 miles on it, so it's got a fresh set of bearings in it, and we are going to just drop that crank back in there with a new seal and just get it a little bit closer to being ready to go. So I will be back in just a little bit as we start that process. I do have one little trick that I've been taught here on making sure your rear main seal doesn't work, so I will show you that. I'm going to get the bearings out and get them cleaned up and in place and greased up with probably with my rear main in place. So that'll be the next thing we're going to do. Okay, we got the main bearings cleaned up and got them all greased and ready to set that crank in there. So that's going to be our next step here. We'll get this thing set up there. All right. So all the pieces off of it. And you know what? Got one more thing I want to do here with some grease. Just to protect that rear main seal, I'm going to grease the back journal on the crank where it runs against that. I don't want anything going in there dry and wearing that seal out, burning it up before it gets a chance to actually seat good. So, yeah, there we go. Sorry, that's off camera, but that's what happens when you get the camera on a tripod, right? You can't catch everything. So I got that done. There we go. Now we're going to drop the crank in there. Do this without hurting myself. Dropping in there as easy as it should. There we go. Okay. Got her in. Okay, so normally I would use some plastic gauge and use that as a way to measure, make sure my bearings were correct. But I already know that these are because they were running in here before and doing fine. So, all right. Next step is I will get my main caps out, get them cleaned up, get the bearings put in them, and then find my bolts and get all ready to set this thing down, get the new caps put on it. So we'll do that, get that prepped up, and we'll be back in a second. All right, so we got everything prepped and ready to put this thing back together here. So let's see if I can show you this on camera. Who knows if this will actually show up. If I can get the camera to focus that closely, but on your bearings right there, there's always some information that's particular to the size of it. I don't know, is that, yeah. Anyway, probably can't read it on there, but these bearings, this crankshaft was turned 20 thousandths under, and so that's what the bearings are telling me. I'm going to put the bearing into the cap. You want to use your finger after you've cleaned them to make sure, because your finger is more sensitive than your eye or anything else that you can do to do these with, and that'll tell you if there's still any dirt on there. Get the little pin lined up there, shove the bearing in, get ourselves a little bit of grease here. it on that. Yeah, and I'm still using some old grease from back in the day, but it works. All right, so there we go. We've got the cap greased up. It's ready to go back on. Now this engine's a 4-bolt block. And what that means is that these 3 center caps each have 4 bolts holding them down. The back one and the front one each only have 1. And so this is a standard 2-bolt cap. If you had a 2-bolt block, all of these back to here would all be this style of a cap. But anyway, so get that one there. And on these caps, on the Chevys anyway, there's an arrow right there. I don't know if that's catching it. Yeah, you can kind of see it. Anyway, that's pointing towards the front of the engine. So we're going to get those dropped on here. Shoved down in place. Now we'll work our way back. We won't work. We will take what we're given. So here's one of our 4-bolt caps. And somebody was kind enough to stamp the number 4 in it right there. So we need to double check the arrow, make sure we're putting it on the number 4 spot. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. The arrow pointing to the front. Get those shoved down in there like that. This one is our number 2. Got a number 2 on it. Got my arrow. Number 2 spot. Incidentally, something that I think is helpful if it's your first time, especially building a motor. When you take things apart, double check to make sure that you've got a directional arrow on these things and that you've got a number on each one of them, because if you don't get them back in the right spot or you get them reversed, then the boring for the crankshaft could be out of alignment like that. And even if it's just a thousandth or two, that can impact how your bearings wear and will probably cause everything to wear out and give you problems. So when you're taking one apart, double check that, make sure they're numbered, make sure they're stamped as to a direction and that sort of thing, so that you don't get those mixed up. If you do, you're going to need to find somebody with some inside micrometers or something to make sure that you get them turned around, put in the right spot. But just don't. When you take your first engine apart, especially, just number everything, put everything back in the same spot, so that you can put it back together correctly. When you get to be a veteran, you've done a lot of them, maybe you won't need to do that. But you do, particularly on your main bearing caps and your rod caps, have got to go back on the right direction too. All right, here's our number 3 with our number 3 right there, arrow pointing forward. Again, I'm not trying to be the engine building pro here. I'm just a guy doing it in my backyard and telling you how I like to do it. All right, so for the last thing, not the last on this part, but the thing that I wanted to tell you, a little secret. So years ago, I restored a 57 Cadillac for a friend of mine, and I got that thing back together, rebuilt new motor, ran beautifully, but we kept getting leaks out the rear main seal, and it was really frustrating. And back in that day, we were dealing with the rope type seals. And what happens in a rope seal, seems like no matter what you do, where this edge of the seal meets the edge down here, it's almost impossible to get them to seal good. And so you probably don't have to do it with these. In fact, somebody's probably going to leave me a comment and say, oh, don't do that, that was stupid. But I like to take a little dab of gasket sealer. Thought I had myself all prepped here, but my gasket sealer is dead. So anyway, I'm going to put a little dab of gasket sealer on there, and it doesn't have to be very much. In fact, you probably don't want very much. But this is a rubber seal, so you may not even want it at all. I don't know. I've never had anybody authoritatively tell me that, and I'll probably get 10 guys acting as authorities telling me that. But a little bit of sealer is not going to hurt anything, because what I'm going to do is put this together, and when it dries, well, first of all, the grease on the crankshaft is going to keep that stuff from sticking to the crank. And then when it dries, it will seal that potential little gap here, especially if you got a rope type rear main seal. And so, okay, I hope this stuff's even any good. Because this is a rubber seal and it should be sealing just fine without this, you'll see I'm not going to put much on it, but on a rope type seal I put a decent little blob of it on there because I want it, Mary, thought I was showing you, because I want it to not have any chance of leaking here. So anyway, there you can see what I've done. It's no big deal on this one, but like I said, on a rubber, a rope seal, you want to do that. Make sure you got a little bit of gasket sealer in there. It's probably a little more than I've got. And when you cut your rope seals off, because they come long, you want to cut them so that they're standing a little above the surface. You know, I don't know what's a little, but a little bit. And that will help them to get that rear main sealed where you're not leaking out those two gaps. All right, so we've got all of our rear mains in place now. We're going to start here. Get myself a clean rag. Get our bolts put in there, and when you put these bolts in, you don't want to put them in dry. You want a little bit of oil in a couple of spots. You want a little bit on the threads, and you want another little bit right on the bottom of the head there, so that as it spins down against the head, it doesn't chafe and grab. It's going to be free to rotate in there smoothly. And that's really what we're after, because if it doesn't rotate smoothly and it's grabbing and stuff, you're going to affect your torque on it, on the bolt itself. And you want the bolts torqued down correctly, not over torqued and not under torqued, but it's a very good chance you're going to get them under torqued if the bolt is too tight in the hole. So that's what we're after right here. Just getting those surfaces oiled up so that they go in good. All right, these are our next ones. And I don't know, maybe there'll be something interesting and valuable to some of your newbies here. I'm definitely sure the veterans won't get a whole lot out of this, but hey, another video for the channel as we progress forward. In fact, just to let you know right here, I was intending to build this to put in my grandpa's C10, but might have a change in plans there. I like driving my rat rod to work now. It's fun. I work at a lumberyard type store, hardware lumberyard, and park it out in the parking lot. And I am all the time getting people driving by and, you know, give me the thumbs up for it. But a ton of people stop. I even have people come in the store and ask, hey, whose old truck is that out there? And then they'll spend 45 minutes talking with me about it. So I get a kick out of doing that. But the other day, I had somebody, one of my work buddies was out on lunch sitting in his truck, and he said a couple of motorhomes pulling a bunch of side-by-sides pulled up and stopped, and about 5 people jumped out of these motorhomes and were walking around my rat rod truck and just going on over it. And he stopped and got out and asked him if they liked it. Oh, yeah, you think you would sell it? And he's like, well, I don't know. What would you give him for it? And the one guy says, yeah, I don't know. I think I'd give him about $35,000 for it. And I'm like, holy cow. Maybe I'm not thinking clearly on this. So I'm right now looking around to build myself another one. And it'll be different, completely different than this one. But since I'm doing that, I've got this fresh motor here. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and put this motor into that project. I'm not sure. We'll just wait and see how it all plays out. But anyway, it's not going to make any difference on how I put it together. So I'm going to shut the camera off, get these other bolts oiled and dropped in here, and then we'll be back. Alrighty, got all of those in, all those bolts in, and so this last steps to run them down hand tight. And that's where you want to be careful, because sometimes these are real tight right where they meet the block there, and it doesn't want to pull down in very easily. So you want to make sure you're actually getting it down in there before you crank too hard on the bolts to start torquing them. So went and looked up the torque specs for these things, and the 2 inner bolts all the way across, so that'll be here, here, and the inner bolts on the 4 bolts, you torque to 70 foot-pounds, and the outer bolts you torque to 65. So we're going to be doing that. Oh, here's just a little tip. Most of the time, you're not going to need an extension to get to these things. Occasionally, you find something where you got to have an extension on it, but keep in mind that an extension inherently can twist a little bit, and that can make your torque specs off. It's not going to be a huge amount, but a couple of tips I would say: use the shortest extension you can get by with if you have to use one. That'll twist less. And if you get into the long ones, I've got a different one that's a very slimmer one than this, and it's prone to twisting more than this one is. So use the shortest one you can and the biggest one around that you can when you're torquing something. But I'm not going to need that for this, so I'm going to take that off and just start here. Now, again, this is something I'll probably get some flack from somebody on, but they ask, what's the pattern to torque all these bolts in? And there might actually be a torque pattern on the main bolts on these things. I don't know for sure, but it's not like a cylinder head where you're torquing one big piece of cast iron down and it could get little flexes in it here and there. You're torquing these individual pieces to the one big casting of the block. And so my approach is going to be to start and do the middle ones. I'll do this one, the 2 middle bolts, and then I'll alternate back to the outer bolts on those 2, and then I'll do this set over here, then this set, then that set, and that set. So a lot of times those torque patterns are more for common sense. Again, some professional mechanic engineer is going to get all over me here and say, no, they're really serious, you got to do that. Well, okay, we should, but if you can never find a torque pattern on something, that's what you want to do. You want to start from the inside and work your way out and alternate. So we're going to start here. I'm using an old type beam type torque wrench because I've had this forever and it always works out well. I've got a clicker, but I'm not 100% sure that it's accurate, so I don't use it. But what I like to do is put myself a tape mark on where that torque spec is. So this is going to be at 70 foot-pounds, so that I know to stop there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull these things in. I'm going to take them up, let's say, to about 50 pounds on those 2 inner ones. And I think I'm even going to do it on the 2 outer ones. We'll pull them up to about 50. And what that does is it gets everything evenly set. It makes sure that your cap is actually seated down in the block right there, and keep rolling a little bit. All right, there we go. So now I'm going to go for my final torque of 70 on these. There. There. And then I remember my outer ones are a little shorter, so they're calling for 65. So we're going to go for 65 on them. 65. 65. So that's got that cap torqued in place. And so I have actually done an engine one time where for some reason I did not get, I think it was actually a rod bolt torqued correctly. And it wasn't 2 miles into or a mile into the test drive maybe before it started letting loose and making some noise. So for my own personal safety and mental safety here, after I have done the whole set, then I'm going to go back through and double check them one more time to make sure they're all torqued correctly. And it just, when you're doing something as expensive and big as this, taking that extra 5 minutes to double check that can be worth thousands and thousands of dollars. So take your time and do that. So there we go. I'm going to shut the camera off while I torque the rest of these down, then double check them, and we'll be back at that point. One other little tip that I learned a long time ago. Sometimes when you're trying to get that final torque on a bolt, on an engine stand especially, you're going to run into what I'm running into here. And that is, when I tighten this, my engine stand wants to move. Alright, so I can stand here and try to hold my feet on it so that I can keep it from moving, and that helps. But sometimes, especially when you get torque and head bolts, which tend to have even more pressure, you still want to move even more. So you can't see here really good, but actually I'll tip the camera if I can. You want to climb up on the engine stand like that, and that way when you're applying torque to it, what you're using for leverage is the engine stand itself. And so you're not fighting it trying to pull away from you on the concrete floor. So there we go. Got those all tightened up. Now, just right at this point, it's a good time to double check everything. See that those are at 70. And these are at 65. Just doing this will help you find if you left a bolt loose somewhere. And you sure as heck don't want to do that. You might be extremely blessed and lucky and have that work for you, but you don't want to count on that, especially if you're doing any kind of a performance motor that's going to run high RPM. You sure as heck don't want to count on luck for something like that. Most of my motors are going to be lower RPM motors, but still, like I said, I've had problems with that before, so don't try to count on luck for something like that. Okay, double checked. They're all tightened down the way that they're supposed to be. And now comes the moment of truth, and that is, will the thing turn in there? Because it should spin quite freely. And we don't know. That's assuming I got the right bearings, that we got the caps all in the right direction, which I'm looking at the arrows here, and we do. So, oh, look at that. That's what you want to see. So at that point, either it's done right or you're too loose somewhere. You got loose bearings or something. But I'm believing that I've got this one correct. And so That's a happy sign for me. A lot of times I put them together and they've spun harder than that, even when I know I've got everything right. So that one is good to go. Like I said, this has been a previously running engine, so I'm not worried about that. All right. And I think before I wrap this video up, I think I'm going to put that camshaft back in it and get the timing chain on and just do that all as part of the video. I don't have the rods and pistons ready to go yet, and so I'm not going to go that far, but let's get that camshaft in. So let's put it around here where you can see a little better. There we go. So we've got that all cleaned out. Yeah. Now, on camshaft, you know what? I'm going to go grab my cam, get it cleaned up, and get my other parts here so that I can do this all in one shot before I do that. So I'll be back in a second. Alrighty, we're back and ready. So spent some time getting the bearings greased up as much as I could reach them in there. I'm going to count. I got most of them. I got them completely greased. I'm going to count on a combination of that and the grease that I've put on the camshaft itself, actually getting this all covered there. So on a camshaft, I know you guys hear this a lot. You're going to need to use a really good camshaft break-in grease, because we have a lot of trouble these days with the new formulations in oils and stuff being made to work in new engines, most of which have roller lifters instead of flat tappet lifters, and that makes for a whole different dynamic in the oiling and lubrication of things, and they can get by with a much different type of oil than they used to be able to. And in fact, the number one thing in these old engines, when you're running one that's got a flat tappet cam in it, hydraulic cam, or even a solid lifter cam, you need to run, first you need a good break-in lube on the cam, and secondly you need to run a good zinc additive in your oil all the time, or you're going to end up chewing up your cam and your lifters. And so even on the newer, even if you got a roller lifter cam, you need to put really good break-in lube on them. So I'm not particularly recommending any specific brand. This is one that I got from the machine shop that I had do quite a bit of my machine work over the years, and they gave me this one, recommended it, so I'm using it. So anyway, I'm hoping this is going to show up what we're doing here. So I've got my camshaft completely coated, all of the bearing surfaces and the camshaft, the lifter lobes, and even the distributor drive gear I've got completely coated. And make sure you cover the entire mating surface when you're doing this. And then in the end of it, got myself a bolt that I can use as a handle, kind of a lever to put the thing in. And we're going to start sticking it in here. And some engines, they have progressively larger diameter cam journals in them, so that it's easy to slide them in. But this small block Chevy, I'm pretty sure, has the same diameter journals all the way through. So we got to be careful as we go through there to just work it in easily. Be careful as you're shoving it in not to drag the gears across it. Try not to drag the cam lobes across it. There, now I'm into the second one. Same thing, just keep going in nice and easy. You're not going to be probably perfect with this, but there's some leeway to just be gentle. Don't try to shove them in there. All right. sometimes you're not quite even going to have enough leverage with your bolt sticking out of it to be able to do that. So it's the first time I've ever really had one give me that much trouble. Usually they get right back in there where they're supposed to be. There we go. Get past some kind of obstruction. Aha, now we're in. Ta-da, camshaft. All right. So that's got that in there. We've got it lubed up the way that it's supposed to be. That should allow us now to get our timing chain set on there. Some of these things actually have a retainer plate to hold the camshaft in there, but apparently Chevys don't. Been a while since I've done one, so I don't know that. All right, I'm going to then shut the camera off, and we'll be back. I got to round up my timing set and see if I've got anything else that needs to go in there with that. So we'll be back in a second. Alrighty, so did a little check and get some information here. So I'm going to turn the engine over and drop my bolts on the ground in order to get this thing referenced the way all the pictures are showing it. All right. So on my crank gear, this is an adjustable gear that has 3 different key slots to where the main key can go in there, so that you can either set it the cam straight up, or you can set it 4 degrees advanced or 4 degrees retarded. And I am going to just put it back to the way that it was, just assuming that the guys that put it together know as much about it as I do, because I don't want to go through the trouble on this motor that was running to degree the camshaft. I feel like that's a good thing to do on a high performance motor, but where we're just basically running a stalker here, I'm not worried about it. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, and I don't care, so I'm just going to do it this way. So anyway, I was trying to figure out, when I tore it apart, I didn't make myself any kind of reference marks to know where these needed to be. So I just went and did some research, and it turns out that what I want, every one of them showed the keyway sitting off at approximately this angle. I'm going to call that a 130 on a clock angle, and that's going to put this little arrow mark here straight up. So I'm assuming this is either advanced or retarded. I don't know, but I want that arrow pointing straight at the center of the camshaft, and I'm sure you can't see that there, so I'm just dinking with it. All right, so there I go. I got that there. Now on my timing gear, this one's nice because it's marked front right there, which makes it easier to tell. These also have, the cam gear has a little indexing marked right there. This one's a round circle, and that needs to be put on there so that that round circle is pointing directly at the arrow on here. So what that means is I need to spin my camshaft around to where it's oriented correctly. And right there should be where we need to be. That's off 1 notch. So there's got those marks aligned. Now gotta spin my cam just a little bit more. There we go. All right. Now we've got our timing marks lined up here. My keys in my keyway correctly. I don't know if my fat head was in the way. Can't tell. Hope you guys saw all that. Anyway, so I got my timing marks aligned here. My key is in the keyway, and the indexing pin here is in the right position. So that's got me timed correctly. Now I've got 3 bolts to go in there. Oh, woe is me, I forgot to get the correct socket on my torque wrench, so you'll have to bear with me while I go find that. Alrighty. So the torque spec on this is from 18 to 20 pounds, it said. I'll grab those sockets real fast. Sockets, torque wrench, and it is 18 to 20 foot-pounds, not inch-pounds. I want to make sure that. There we go. So 18 to 20 is not very much. We'll see if I can do it without spinning the motor. If the motor spins in that process, I'll have to do something to lock it in place. So let's see. I need to move my tape mark on my torque wrench. I could just eyeball it, but this makes it a little easier for an old blind guy to see it. All right. That would be a good excuse, except I've been doing that since I was a teenager. But anyway, all right. Now it's going to turn on me. Okay. I think I can fix that by doing that. Got a crowbar wedged in the flywheel there. Oh yeah, he's right on up there. I'm going to take these up to 20. There we go. And there we go. Double check that one. Yep, all good. Okay, that's got me installed there. So, I think that that's about as far as I'm going to go on this video. Like I said, my next step would be to put the pistons, pistons and rods in there. But I've got to, see, I told you I had to get a new rod for this thing. So I've got to swap the piston onto that rod. I'm going to make a final decision whether I'm going to use all the brand new pistons I got or just 2 of them to replace the ones that were damaged. Don't know the answer to that yet, but got to do that, get the rings on them, and then I'll be ready to drop those into here. So what I'm going to do now is get this thing covered up so I don't get any dirt in it, and that'll wrap up this episode of the basic crank and cam assembly on my small block Chevy for the pickup or my next rat rod project, whatever it is that we're going to do here. You just kind of take them as they come and use them where that they're going to be the most useful. Here's the dirty secret is I really want to put an LS in my grandpa's truck, but we just got to see how that works out in the long run. Even if I do get that figured out, that'll leave me with a whole other small block Chevy that's probably a 4-bolt main motor in that truck that I can then rebuild for the next project. So there you are. That's Eldon coming at you again here from Crazy Dad's Garage. I hope you're enjoying the series. Maybe if you're not, at least I am, and I get to record myself doing it. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, hope everybody has a fun time. You have a great day. Enjoy yourself, and we'll sign off until we can talk to you again. See you later.